Welcome to your capital. I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate your patience. This is the first of what we want to be a weekly series. We're a little disorganized, so thanks for your patience, and we will, as this goes on, we'll make sure everything is set up a little more organized in advance, but obviously to see so many people come out on the first day is great, so I applaud you. I'm Lieutenant Governor McGeachin. The purpose of this weekly session, which we are calling Capital Clarity, is to, there's actually it's a threefold purpose. First of all, we want to help the citizens of Idaho understand the legislative process. Secondly, we want to help the Idaho citizens understand legislation as it's working its way through. And then thirdly, we want to help Idaho citizens know how to effectively communicate with your legislators as these bills are working their ways through the committee process. And so that's really the simple purpose of what this is all about. We're all seeing so many of you that are concerned about what's happening in not just our state, but in our nation. And I think it's so awesome that the people of Idaho have a thirst for knowledge and understanding what can I do to get involved in this process and have my voice be heard by the people that make decisions here in your building. And on Monday, the first day of the legislative session, there were multiple people that came into our office and asked, can you help me, if I want to go testify on a bill, can you help me with what to say in front of the senators? And so that's kind of, all these things kind of led to what we're here for and the purpose here, because we've been so accustomed to just living our lives, our daily normal lives, and maybe not being as engaged in the process as maybe we should have been. But now a lot of people are waking up and want to get involved in the process and understand how to get involved. And for those that don't know, I did serve as a state representative for 10 years, and I understand the legislative process. I welcome Senator Lee. Come on in. And I understand the process. I understand what is the appropriate way to present before a legislative committee, and what is the way that's not appropriate and not effective. And I can tell you, as a chair of the committee, during some very contentious sessions, I had to gavel some people and have them be quiet during the legislative session. And so we'll review some of those things. Not the legislative session, I'm sorry, during the committee procedure. Because, really, this is all about protecting this democratic process that we all hold very dear, so that we can understand how, as a citizen, that we can deal with contentious issues sometimes when there are strong feelings on both sides, and learn how to be respectful towards each other, allow our voices to be heard, and be effective. Sometimes our voices, what we're advocating for or against, sometimes we win and sometimes we lose. But it's important for you all to feel, as citizens, comfortable with this process and what we can do to help you gain that confidence to know how to come and have your voice be heard appropriately. So that's the purpose of this meeting. And it's 101, so what we thought we would start with is just kind of a general review of how to understand and navigate the legislative website. As I was preparing for bills that have already been printed, I printed out 2 or 3 copies for myself, for my staff, and so for the legislators. And I can't print out 20 or 30 bills for all of you, because it's not even, we don't want to cut down that many trees to do that. But so that's what we're going to do today to start with, is just show you how you can navigate the legislative website, how to go find a bill, and we'll pull these bills up on the screen. And there's just small nuances about each one of these bills that as we do this, then we'll go through and point out some of the nuances of each of the bills and not taking positions on the bills. And then we will turn some time over to the legislators, and we have, fortunately, we have Representative Heather Scott, who is the author of one of the House bills, and then we have Senator Lee, that's one of the sponsors of one of the Senate bills. And so we'll give each of them amount of time to stand up and explain the legislation a little bit. And then after that, last 15 minutes or so, if you have questions about the bill or questions about the process of when it's going to go through and how do we need to engage you when it's time to come to the Capitol and testify, and any questions that you might have about that. So with that, I will go ahead and turn over to both Dustin and Representative Moon to help navigate through the legislative website.
Thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and this is a very important day because we have to make sure that you all are involved in this process because things are a little bit different around here in the Capitol. So I am the liaison between the State Republican Party and the legislature for the House. That means at the Republican meetings, when there are resolutions put forward, I'm supposed to make sure that they get a hearing or they get into committee and make their way to the floor. Sometimes it's not as easy as you think because a lot of times your wishes may not be fulfilled by the House or the people that you have elected, and we've got to make sure we do that. So what I'm going to do is give a quick primer on how to navigate the Idaho Legislature website. It does not take but a minute. Because a lot of times I'll have constituents, and I represent District 8. I've got Lemhi, Custer, Boise, Gem, and Valley County. I've got 30% of the state geographically. It's all rural. And a lot of times we don't have the wherewithal to actually get internet to pick this stuff up and to find it. So I have to send hard copies a lot of times. So if you can access it, that is huge, and it helps us out a lot. So I'm going to go over here with Dustin, and Dustin Hurst is going to show us. Click on the buttons for me, and if you can just follow along real quick, and then we will move on to the exciting bills that our legislators have brought forward this week. Okay, this first page, just type in Idaho State Legislature, and there you go. That's what you've got. If you look down to the left where it says legislative sessions, click on that, the one with the thing that looks like a bill, and open it up. And then if you'll see a list, there's links. The link below will be added to information. Bill Center is the one you're interested in. If it says Bill Center, that means there's bills listed there. That doesn't mean a draft or an RS. These are the ones who have actually got went through committee and have been printed. So these are good to go. Now they have a lot of steps to become a law, but that's good too, because we shouldn't make it too easy, but we want to make it easy enough that at least you can read them and provide input. So if you notice, he has brought you up now to the screen with the House bills. There are 3 of them, and we will have Representative Scott talk about HCR 1, the concurrent resolution to remove the emergency order. And yes.
Can I interject real quickly here? On this bill, the thing, and every bill is unique and different. On this bill, what I wanted to point out that's different is the very back section 2 where it says, an emergency existing, therefore, which emergency is hereby declared to exist, this act shall be in full force and effect on and after its passage and approval. What that means is typically all the bills that go through the legislative process become effective on July 1 of the year that we're in. Unless it's specified this way, that means it goes into effect immediately. That's all I want to point out.
Thank you.
That was little nuances.
Because there's a lot of differences in these bills. That's why you need to read them, and if you need help understanding, well, then you can give your legislator a call.
If you just tell them this one is.
Yes. So this one bill, HJR 001, the third one listed down under the House side, that is a constitutional amendment, and we've got 2 folks that are carrying that one on the House side, and we have the other 2 that will be over here on the House side as well. And if you look below the Senate bills, you have 3 that all deal with disasters and emergency management. And then apparently we also now have a 4th Senate concurrent resolution that deals with emergency emergencies as well. So we're kind of hitting the big issues that all of you are concerned about first. And that's what we want to deal with. And I know everybody's calling us trying to get some of these bills that are personal bills that you really want to get through. But right now, none of us are even really entertaining too many of those because this is first and foremost, I think, in all of our minds to take care of this issue. So at this time, I would like to call Heather Scott, who is the author of the House Concurrent Resolution, very similar to the one that was run in the extraordinary session, to remove the emergency order. But it didn't get done, and by golly, we're going to try to do it this go. Okay, Representative Scott. Okay, I'm sorry. And Representative Julianne Young has also been working diligently on these bills to make sure there's no loopholes that will give anybody more power than they should have. Okay.
Thank you for having us. I'm Representative Heather Scott from District 1. I'm Representative Young from District 31. And we have been working a ton on all the legislation that has been introduced. There's 5 bills that have been introduced with language that is being sold to us and as to the citizens that it will rein in the governor's powers. That being said, it is critical that we look at the words and what the bills are actually doing. Because sometimes when you're told it does something and, hey, it's gonna pass, you kind of maybe don't spend as much time looking at the words. And that's something you as citizens can really help with, is looking at those words and catching words and making sure they're defined and they make sense. And so Representative Young and myself and another team of citizens and more legislators have been, I bet we've spent over 30 hours working on this. And we found a lot of areas in these bills that it says we're going to reduce the governor's powers, but we're actually expanding his powers. So there's a lot of little fixes we need to do in this legislation. But what we're going to start with is our resolution, which is House Concurrent Resolution 1. And what a resolution is, it's different than a bill because a resolution gets passed by the House, a joint resolution gets passed by the House and the Senate, and it does not need to go to the governor's desk to get a veto or non-veto. So this resolution will end the emergency immediately upon signature by the House and Senate. This is similar to the same resolution that we passed back in the special session, that the Senate said, well, we're gonna wait until we get back into session and then we'll address the emergency. And it's very simply written, and it literally ends the emergency. And there's been a lot of talk about, well, it's gonna end all the funding. And so Julianne, can you touch on that a bit? She spent a lot of time with the Director of Emergency Management and has been talking with, to understand all the FEMA and all the ways money come in for emergencies and out. And do you want to just touch on that a bit?
Certainly, Representative Scott. So these issues get pretty complicated, and I will tell you that right now I'm studying all of the options available to us. And part of what you're seeing with all of these different options is that we're all trying to cover our bases, right? Because we don't know exactly how this is going to go, and a concurrent resolution goes into effect in a different way than a bill does. And we may have to override a veto, and we may not. We don't know all of those things. So what you're seeing right now is a smorgasbord of ideas and options. And the purpose of our public process is to take all these buffet of options now and sort through them and figure out which things are going to best accomplish the things that we care about. So one piece of concern in all of these has been, as we go through the steps of ending a state of disaster emergency, how will that affect funding? And one concern has been, we currently have some states of disaster emergency that have been open for a number of years. And we are told the reason for this is that it takes a long time to work with the federal government. And so where we are waiting for federal funding to cover some of these disasters, we have these states of disaster emergency that have been extended for 5 and 6 years in some of these instances. And so the concern is, well, if we end the state of disaster emergency, what is that going to do for these things that are already in place? In the case of your language, Heather, is specific to COVID, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and also Senator Lee's resolution is specific to COVID, so neither of these particular resolutions should affect any state of emergency that's been declared for anything else. I did have a good conversation with General Ritchie, who is the head of our Office of Emergency Management. And what I learned from him is that the reason these emergencies have been open for 5 and 6 years is not because of FEMA. It's because of some language in our state law, which we are changing, that currently requires that emergency money only be spent during the disaster emergency. And we're changing that during to say that monies and accounts arising from a disaster emergency, I'm not sure I said that exactly right, that those can be taken care of after the fact. FEMA doesn't require that state of disaster emergency to remain open until those accounts are all settled. But they do want a state of disaster emergency, an open state of disaster emergency, in order to make an agreement. So those states of disaster emergency would need to be open long enough to assess the damage and have an agreement in place. And then, as long as we change the language in our state law, we should be able to close those states of disaster emergency. So hopefully that provides some clarity
Yes.
to that.
That's great. And what we don't want to do is say there's an emergency just to get money, right?
Right.
Because I see with the new administration, every bit of money comes with strings attached. Comes with something we've got to do or some hoop we've got to jump through. And what we don't want to do is say, oh, it's an emergency, money, emergency. So we want to definitely we need to be careful. And I think you're going to see some fireworks over the next month because we have to work these things out with 105 people. And that's crazy. And everyone's coming from a different area. They get different ideas. And I think the most important point is you need to be part of that process. You need to be engaged in that process because government has a plan and a goal. And if you don't put yourself in that plan and goal, you're not going to be thought about. And so I would encourage you to Zoom in or listen in. I know some of the committee rooms are not taking as many people. Some of the committees are taking remote testimony so you can call in and then contact your legislators. When you figure out that there's a word that's actually expanding the governor's powers and it's been slipped in, you need to bring that to the attention of your legislators and say, this is unacceptable. That's a big thing, and that's personally, that's one of my concerns. There's a lot of language that is not defined in our code that's expanding the governor's authority, and unless citizens speak out and step up and catch those and put pressure on their legislators to say this is unacceptable, because there's always that bait and switch, right? We're gonna rein in the governor, but are we? So only you can make that decision, and so stay tuned and be engaged. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much, Representatives Young and Scott. Before we move towards Senate bills that have been printed so far, just a few more comments on process. As you go to that bill center, there's another link that's you can click on, and it's called the Statement of Purpose. And the Statement of Purpose is meant to be kind of a layman's understanding of what the bill does. It's very simple, very, very straightforward, and also according to the law that if any bill causes a fiscal impact, that has to also be revealed here. And also by clicking on that Statement of Purpose, you can see who is sponsoring the bill, and then oftentimes there is a list of co-sponsors to the bill so that you can find out, well, is my senator or representative supporting this bill or not? You can find out by clicking on that, and it's all part of that same area where under Bill Center that you can find all this information. And then also as far as the process, it is difficult, especially as the legislative body moves further into the legislative session and more bills are being printed and debated. It is difficult sometimes to stay up on the process and where is the bill at any given time? When's the committee gonna have a public hearing for it? So that is challenging to follow, again, especially towards the end of the session when things are happening real fast. What I would suggest and recommend that you somehow get onto a mailing list or a phone call list with your state representative and your senator to communicate to them so that they know the issues that are important to you and can keep you informed on when a public hearing might be. That part does happen real fast. Okay, so moving on to Senate bills that have been introduced. Yesterday there was a Senate Bill 1001 that was introduced, and this bill deals directly with the definition of a disaster in the state of Idaho. Then there was Senate Bill 1002 that deals specifically with accessing funding, and that might have been in reference to what Representative Young was talking about. And I haven't had it, everything is so new. Not those of us who haven't worked on the bills really haven't had time to analyze these. I haven't. I'm just trying to explain them briefly to you. Senate Bill 1003, this was a bill that deals with definitions and authority of the governor. But what I want to point out on this bill, it was brought by Senate Pro Tem Chuck Winder and the Speaker of the House, Scott Bedke, but it also has a list of Senate and House leadership co-sponsors. So that's just an example of, again, how you can see who's working behind each bill. So the next bill, which is also a resolution, a Senate concurrent resolution number 101, brought by Senate leadership, and we're thankful this afternoon to have Senator Abby Lee here to come and discuss this bill. So welcome, Senator Lee.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for coming. Thank you for being a part of this and for being engaged in government. I appreciate the opportunity to present the other perspective from the other side of the rotunda. And it is a deliberative process, this government, and it is checks and balances, and it is, I'm grateful that we have two bodies that can discuss these things and to bring things out in the open. And so as you heard, a really great description from the authors of HCR 101, the Senate came out with our resolution. And we're hopeful that we can come together. As you saw in the special session and was alluded to, there's a little bit of, oh, and the Senate wouldn't do this. And I'll tell you again, and we'll stand very firm, when the Constitution and the statutes conflict, the Constitution prevails. And our Constitution was very clear in the special session. We wanted to do much of what the House wanted to do, but the Constitution, which we have a proposal this session to change our Constitution, we should change it, so that we can call ourselves back in states of emergency. And you'll be able to look at that and vet that a little bit. But our Constitution currently did not allow that. We wanted the governor to call us back. He didn't call us back. That is the powers that the legislature has delegated to the governor. We are responsible for giving the governor that power, and if we want to rebalance that power, which we should rebalance that power this session, we must do it through a deliberative process, which is governance. And so you'll see us do that, and we have different ideas about that. But the concurrent resolution that was sent to us by the House simply was not within the framework of the constitutional allowance, and that was the Senate. The House could disagree, but that's where we landed. And so what we proposed were 8 talking points, things that we wanted to make sure that the Senate got done with the House, and we want to do things like make sure that every Idahoan is essential. Everyone can work. Every job is essential. We want to preserve and protect our constitutional rights, including the right to worship. And so you'll see a number of those, but what we came up with in Senate Resolution 101, which is a counterbalance to a little bit of what the House is doing, is the same thing, that we want to end the emergency immediately. Yes. But the difference, and we appreciate that we want to direct it just to the COVID emergency so that we can make sure that wildfire funding, we're not going to let the feds off the hook for the cost of making sure that they are paying for the cost of not managing forests. Flooding and those types of things. And so we're similar on that. We want to make sure that we're directing this to COVID. But the Senate wants to make sure that we are also not limiting the dollars for this emergency. So we want to end the emergency, we want to end the orders, but to the extent that we have other things that might come out of this. Right now, we've spent a lot of time with General Richie Chu. Bless his heart, his name's going to be banded around here. He is our emergency management person, and I worked with him almost every single day in 2017. I represent a district that was really hit by snowpocalypse. And so what's different about this emergency and what happened in Washington County and Weiser, those are my folks who know what happened there with our Indian sheds coming in. We had a finite period of an emergency. So we had about 30 days. And when you do a disaster emergency declaration, you get funding and you get it just for that period of days. So after January 27th, if February 5th something happened, those dollars that we got to help assist in this devastation couldn't be used. It was any damage that happened between this period of time. That's what makes this so different, and it makes it so extended, and why we want to limit this. But we are not willing in the Senate to give up. This would affect all our Meals on Wheels dollars, because we know in our communities we have more seniors who are isolated in their homes because they are concerned, because they are high risk. And right now, those federal emergency funds are paying for that and helping us serve these vulnerable people in our communities. We're not looking for dollars just for the sake of dollars, but right now our National Guard is deployed to help our hospitals and some of these clinics in high impact areas, and those are all federal dollars. Those are your dollars that you send to the federal government that we get back to help address this in our community. So General Richie has given us a little bit of a different perspective, and that is the only difference between, is we want to make sure that to the extent that there are dollars, Idaho Falls School District got $95,000 of federal funds to address their cleaning and PPE and the things that people in that community felt like they needed. If we end this with no provision for ensuring that we can get our Idaho dollars back to help our nursing homes and our hospitals in this time of differences of opinion, but there are people who are getting sick. These federal dollars, our dollars, are going to come back and help that. And so that is the difference between the Senate resolution and the House resolution. We are on the same page with the House. We want to end this emergency. We want to make sure that the freedoms and rights of the people to move about our communities. Why is it, again, as we've heard, can I go to Costco, but I can't go watch my kid play basketball? So these are things that we are very aware of. We are going to work to make sure that what the legislature gave the executive branch, we are going to rebalance. And I think that's the difference. I would tell you that we are working, I believe we're working very closely to get to this resolution. And our resolution, again, would be in effect upon passage. So as Representative Scott told you, this isn't subject to a veto. This is not subject to waiting till July 1st. And so that's our process, and we're gonna work really hard to get there. Am I taking questions?
If you're open to questions.
I'm happy to.
I just got a quick, what about the lawsuit from the Democrats that they always seem to file and they don't agree with something?
I think that's probably a different issue, not related to the legislation.
Okay.
But we're walking through lots of lawsuits.
Yeah. If you have a specific question on a bill, then that would be appropriate.
And you introduce yourself.
Directly to what you related in the differences, and my question or comment is, so in my past, I have a history. I've worked for the Bureau of Homeland Security as a grant administrator. I also was on a hotshot crew and I fought forest fires. And what I can tell you is I saw tremendous waste. So my question is, when you say, well, we've got this money and some of these folks need this, well, one of the serious issues that I think we've had for a very, very long time within our government structure and society is a tremendous amount of waste. People get money dangled in front of them and they see it. And I saw it in my own past work where they come out and say, we have this much for the budget, we haven't spent it all, what do you need? And this is happening. And average citizens don't know this is happening. That's why I left government work. So my question to you is this comment about, well, the money, so where do you at some point hold people accountable to make sure they're truly using it? Because it's the people's money.
Absolutely.
And that's one of my biggest concerns with these kinds
So
of
I've served the last 4 years on the Joint Finance Appropriation Committee, and I just was elected leadership, so I'm not on that committee. But I'm telling you that our legislature and setting up some of our federal oversight and looking at things is looking at that very thing. But the question in front of us today is we don't know. We don't know the effect of just shutting that down and the impact. And so what the Senate is saying is, let's figure this out. And what we believe the House resolution, and they'll tell you something different, and reasonable minds can disagree, and it's a great process, that by just shutting it down right now, we cannot answer the questions about what are the unintended consequences of doing that within our communities. And so the Senate wants to have a robust discussion. We're going to have this discussion in State Affairs. We're going to have people come and testify, and everybody's going to get to hear the references to the individuals in the executive branch that we talked about. And you'll be able to hear them say, hey, this is my opinion about what the effect will be. And we might say, we don't care, we're done. That is our process, and that's the debate that's going to be had on the Senate side, is bringing people in to say, okay, if you do this, this is the impact back out to our cities, counties, and communities. And again, we can agree and say, yeah, and we're done. Turn it off. We don't want that kind of assistance. But before we do that, we want to have an open, deliberative process. Hi.
So is this a matter of the House bill gets passed, or then the Senate bill gets passed, or if both of them get passed, or if the Senate side wants their bill to get passed versus the House side? Like, if both of them get passed, or if they both don't get passed, I guess what I'm saying is, are they competing against each other?
So right now they are competing against each other. Like we understand on the Senate side, if we just pass this and send it over to the House side, I'm pretty sure the House is going to say, no, thank you. And if they just push it through and send it over us, you've seen what the Senate answer is. So this gives us an opportunity to have the two hearings. We're going to listen to what happens on the House side. They're going to listen to what happens on the Senate side. And maybe we both come out with something different. Maybe it's neither one of these things because we've learned something more and we can draft a new concurrent resolution. But so these are two different talking points. It was a little bit of our answer to say, you know what, this isn't going to get traction over in the Senate side. We also are very sensitive to the House sends us things and that dang Senate won't pass things. We feel a little bit of the same. And again, I think that's the competition and a little bit of the collaboration. So hopefully we might come up with something completely different. We might have something amended. There's lots of opportunities. We're 4 days into the session, so this is a good time to be having that. Is that helpful?
Just a clarification, maybe just to simplify it, is you have members that they would like to put everybody back to work, stop this shutdown, but on the other side you have some post-crisis issues that are still lingering, that require assistance and some money. So to simplify it, it sounds like you want to pass a law so we can open everything back up, but you also have to make sure that you have a certain amount of funding left over for these post-crisis issues that you're still contending with.
And what are those post-crisis issues, right? So I think the experts to come. But the experts are just advising us. We're the policymakers, and we can always just say no. But you're
Is
right.
that correct? I mean,
Yes.
that's really the conundrum.
That's really the conundrum of where the Senate is.
Okay.
One
Yeah, one or two more. I'm trying to be collaborative, but
Because we want to stay within.
And
So-
Lieutenant Governor, why don't you?
My concern is that will this bill really truly, because it seems like in the past and even now ongoing, will this limit the government of control when there's money attached to some? It just seems like when you have money attached to helping people, there's more government control over the people. And it just seems so, it's, to me, it's not,
You're right. I mean,
right.
I think
I don't like that.
I think it's complex, but I'll tell you that this resolution, neither of these resolutions is final. We have a number of statutory changes that have to go through to do what we need to do to rebalance the power. So this does one piece, but it doesn't get to the local public health district. It doesn't get to the mandates. It doesn't get to all of these other powers. And so you'll see a successive, as you saw our good Lieutenant Governor talk about other things that have been introduced. This is a comprehensive package. But to the extent that we want to end the emergency order right now, but just know that, as we said before, just ending the emergency order doesn't get you to all the systemic changes that we also need to make.
Do you want one more question or are you done?
I'm happy to do whatever.
Okay, how
I
about
don't
one
wanna
more question
monopolize
for the
your
senator?
You've mentioned several times that the legislature gave the governor the power to declare an emergency. How long ago was that?
So many, many years ago, and I think that's the other piece that we're looking at. So back during Sputnik, during the Cold War, we passed a number of emergencies. And we delegate that authority to the executive branch because we're not a full-time legislature. And we probably, as we agree, we've delegated too much. So what we are doing today, we need to be cognizant that probably we will do what legislators did before us. They pass something, they put it on the shelf, and now we're pulling it off the shelf and we're saying, this doesn't work for this situation. Whatever we do, we hopefully will get through with this and we won't have emergencies. We'll put it back on the shelf. And 40 years from now, we have to be accountable to those other legislatures that will follow us to say, what were they thinking? And you'll see the debates in the next couple of weeks. We have some really big problems with our statutes that don't address current day. And it's a great opportunity for us to come together and put something in place that will, 40, 50 years from now, hopefully people can look back and say they were thoughtful about that.
Okay, thank you so much, Senator. I want to especially thank Senator Lee for coming today completely at the last minute. We really appreciate being here and also being willing to take questions on the fly like that. And as you can see, we've heard from two different perspectives. That is the beauty of our system. Now, the system, the way it's designed by our founding fathers, is to somehow try to hash these things together and come up with the best policy for the people of Idaho. I'm going to interject before I turn time over to Representative Scott to answer questions and just lay out a few guidelines, recommendations for when you ask questions. One rule of thumb is don't ever ask a question that you already know the answer to. That's one thing that in the committee that we learn is really important, because if you already know the answer to the question that you're asking your fellow colleague, what you're doing is you're putting your colleague in a very uncomfortable position. You're trying to manipulate the situation. So don't do that. Don't ask a question that you already know the answer to. Another guideline for when you are asking questions, always stick to the issue at hand, and when it comes time for you to testify in front of a committee, you need to make your point very succinct, very clear, very much to the point. Especially when we get into the difficult legislation, when there's 100 people lining up to testify. The legislators and the members of the committee are listening to a whole bunch of different people. You need to learn how to make your point very succinct, very clear to them. So don't linger on stuff that doesn't matter, that's peripheral. Focus on the language of the bill, whether it's one word or one sentence, and make your point very clear to the members of the legislature. There's other things that I can think of. Any other suggestions for testifying or, again, to that point, you always stick to the issue, the bill, the language, and don't ever go to question the motive or the intent of the individual. You will lose credibility if you do that very quickly, because as you see, we're all just normal people, just like all the rest of you. And nobody likes to be put on the spot or have their integrity be questioned. But if you have a legitimate question about language or the proposal, then that's always appropriate. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn time over to Representative Scott to make some comments, let her answer questions, and then the last 5 minutes or so we'll wrap up if you have any questions for me. But at this point, go ahead, Representative Scott.
Well, just a couple more things to add to the Lieutenant Governor's points. With the small committee room size, you may, after you testify, you may want to leave the room to open up a seat for somebody else. And you can just watch the rest of it online. So I just want to make a couple more comments. The collaboration on these bills needs to be between the House and the Senate, not the House and the executive branch, not the Senate and the executive branch. It needs to be between the bodies, because we are the ones that work for the people, and the executive branch, who in my opinion, seems to be forgetting its role and has decided to write law and many other things, needs to stay out of our conversations. If we're if we're going to rein the executive branch in, the collaboration needs to be between the Senate and the House, and not the
Amen.
Senate and the executive branch. They don't need to be in the executive branch does not, we might need to get information, but they don't need to be in the compromise. So I just wanna make that point, and I wanna just remind you a couple points from our resolution, is that this emergency has been over 300 days. It's continued on and on and on. And our livelihoods have been greatly disrupted. And that's why it's imperative that we end this emergency immediately and not continue to hold it open in hopes that some more money from a new administration with new carrots involved is gonna come in and come into Idaho State. So we have enough problems of our own within our state, we just don't need the federal carrots. And that's all I'll say, and then I'll take a couple questions. I'll start this way.
Hi,
Hi.
Kim Wickstrom, 1401 PC. I was just wondering, I was speaking with a House rep yesterday, and he mentioned that resolutions are great, but they don't stop the governor from 5 minutes later declaring another resolution. Is that true?
It may be, but do you think, maybe this governor has the guts to do that? I don't know that he has the guts. If the legislature who represents the people end this emergency, if he's going to have what it takes to just go up and sign another emergency, I think that would put a lot of pressure. He might think twice. But he probably could, but he'd have to justify that. And I always tell people in my district, these elections, they have consequences. We have 4 years with this executive regime or whatever we want to call it. And so elections have consequences, and it is critical that the people we get into office are public servants working for the citizens and not working for other issues. So
A follow-up on that, is it possible to go ahead and pass something very quickly that maybe you don't like, but then, so that we can stop this emergency declaration, but then go back to it and amend it the way that you want to with the funding?
not with this. This has, as soon as it's signed, it ends it immediately. And I don't know that, like, it has to pass both bodies. And so I'll move on to another question.
So can you explain to me how then it doesn't all just collapse with the health districts and what they're doing and all that stuff? How does it not end, since they are basing all of their decisions on a premise that there's an emergency? How does that not just all collapse?
Okay, so they are. The problem we have with health districts is they're regional government. A lot of people do not understand regional government. In regional government, they're not accountable to you the citizens. There are these quasi-governments that basically take control of an area that doesn't have a political boundary. And so it's hard because you see, well, there's a county commissioner on there, he's elected, why can't he stop this? But he's one vote of all these people that don't represent the citizens in their area. So our regional health districts are a huge issue. They need to be addressed in our legislation this year. That will go through Health and Welfare Department. And I will tell you, it will be a battle getting it through the chairman of those committees unless they understand the need to do it. So that being said, I put that on the citizens. You need to make your voice clear with these health districts. And so the state has ceded a lot of power to these health districts.
So then at this point, we can't just say there's no emergency, you have to stop what you've been doing.
Okay, so what they are prescribing is a violation of your constitutional rights. You do not have to follow, you do not have to let somebody violate your rights. And so that being said, I would put it back on the citizens to allowing them to do this to you. You either stand up to this or you don't. And so it's a violation. Do you believe your rights come from God, or do you believe your rights come from the health districts? Do you believe your rights come from government, or do you believe they come from God? And so they don't have the authority to do what they're doing. I said in committee this morning, the governor does not have the authority to limit basketball games to 2 people per person. That is a violation of his authority. So you either hold him accountable or you don't. and elections have consequences. Once again, one more question. I'm gonna go to this side of the room just because I haven't hit this side.
Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize for my ignorance to all this. I'm just learning. So thank you for educating me. I just want to make sure I really understand this. So if I am understanding this correctly, the House is saying we want to stop this emergency that's literally affecting what's going on in our state and our city as far as businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the House is saying we don't want to stop that because that will affect the money that we have coming in for health services. Is that correct?
So and correct me if I'm wrong, but the fear of the Senate is if we end the emergency, we will not be able to tap into federal funds. Is that correct?
So we
Right.
want to end the emergency, and we believe that we can still end the emergency, just like we have done ending the disasters. The Washington County example, where it was just for this period of time, but for the next 2 years, we were still able to get federal funds to rebuild bridges and roads, and so that's the clarification that we want to make. But be clear, we want to end this emergency, just like you said.
But how is this about the people?
Look, I will say this, from where I'm coming from, and I can't speak for the Senate, and you can call your senator and Senator Abby Lee and discuss this with her. But if there is no emergency, why do we want federal emergency money? That's my question. If there's no emergency, why are we taking taxpayer dollars to do whatever? And so it's one thing if, and Representative Young explained how we can still get money for fires and floods and that, but with the new administration and what the CDC's put out through FEMA and what can happen through FEMA, why does Idaho want more FEMA money if our emergency's ended? And that's where my stance is with this resolution. The emergency needs to end today.
Okay, so one last thing. How can somebody like me do something to stop what's going on at the Senate, because it's not for the people, in my opinion? Like, how can we do something? What do we do?
Testify.
I'll say one thing. Make sure you understand the process.
Okay.
Sign up for my legislative updates, or sign up for the legislators' updates, and they will keep you informed with what's going on. And then you need to build a relationship with your elected officials. Most people don't know what district they live in. They don't know who their representative is or their senator is. Figure out who they are. Find out how they're voting. If you're not sure, you can't get it from them, or they won't contact you, contact one you trust and ask, who is this person? How do I get a hold of them? Set up an appointment and talk to them and find out where they're coming from.
You know, I just thought that it might be good to make one clarifying comment as we finish here. Both of these bills that we've talked about are just freshly printed. And many members of both House and Senate haven't even had a chance to read both bills, or both resolutions.
We haven't read this either.
That's right. And so before we make broad characterizations about the House wants this or the Senate wants this, let's just remember that we're putting forward ideas for robust discussion, and I think it's obvious that a part of that discussion will be what role will federal dollars play in all of this, and so it's important to have that conversation. Let's just remember that right now we're at the very starting points, and one thing I will say is, not in relation to these specific pieces of legislation, but other things that we are working on, there has been a phenomenal amount of collaboration and work that has gone on between the House and the Senate for many things that we all agree on. So as we work toward the things that we value, let's remember the things that we are accomplishing and work toward the things we hope to still accomplish without throwing out the things that we have accomplished. If that makes sense.
Beautiful way to
So, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being involved, and I just appreciate so much the chance to be part of the process and to share that with all of you.
Can you take the questions?
Well, at the very end, we'll take a few more questions, but Representative Moon wanted to make a comment.
And just because this is a very quickly pulled together meeting, and I'm thrilled that you're all here, but we need to recognize somebody else in the room, and this is Destin Hurst. He is the Vice President of Idaho Freedom Foundation, and he was gracious enough to come and help us get this pulled up for you on the screen. But what I'd also like to say is that
It was really hard. The hard work here.
so we don't have to pay you, pro bono.
Wait a second.
So anyway, but one thing I want to say is that the Idaho Freedom Foundation is an organization that you can access to actually track how our legislators are voting on bills, so bills that concern you. You might want to follow those bills, and then if you see that your legislator is going a little wonky on you, you might want to give them a call and say, I would like you to vote a different way, or at least hear me out. So the Idaho Freedom Foundation does provide a great service. They've been around for over 25 years, I
No,
guess.
12 years.
12 years.
Yeah, but
Oh,
I mean,
I'm looking at
go
the
with 25, it's good.
the director. But anyway, they've been around forever, and if you need to access their site, that's great. If not, just as Representative Scott was saying, get involved with your legislator. Make sure that you reach out on how to get on a newsletter. Now, all of my constituents, and then some even beyond my district, have given me their email, and I'm sending out information to all of them as fast as I get it, and we'll do analysis on the bills as well, which is also something Idaho Freedom Foundation does, should you be so inclined or, like the direction. But anyway, I appreciate you being here. I'm going to turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor. Thanks.
Thanks, Representative Moon.
Thank you.
Also want to thank our Capitol Security for their assistance in helping us get the audio all set up. And a thank you for you being here to help keep us all safe. Please make sure that you thank them on your way out. Thank them for their service and let them know how much they're loved and appreciated. We're going to continue these on a weekly basis as long as you're interested. We will be looking at a bigger venue, perhaps the Lincoln Auditorium, but we'll have to clear that with House leadership because we can hold more people there and people can sit, and if they want to space out, that's fine. But also we will continue the online, so for those who can't make it every Thursday at noon or don't feel comfortable, we want the citizens to just be a part of this process. So with that, if you have any questions, it's a few questions and we'll wrap things up. The legislators need to get to back to work. Do you want to introduce the new county commissioner for Ada County?
We have two, I saw two county commissioners, Ada County commissioners, Ryan Davidson, and Rod Beck, I saw him earlier, and also wanted to recognize Victor Miller. He's the Ada County Central Committee Chair. Are there any other elected officials that I'm missing? Okay. Any questions for me? Oh, Representative Shepherd, thanks for being here. Yes.
Okay, so my question is, does this disaster emergency limit it to COVID-19? Because here's my concern. The next viral outbreak, COVID-21, will this prevent us from that scenario as well, or does this protect from all viral outbreaks that could be coming down the pipeline, or is it only limited to COVID-19?
It's written in the law, so.
Just COVID-19.
19.
So the Senate is coronavirus or COVID-19. So ours contemplated that it would be COVID-20, but it doesn't address all viral outbreaks because there might be some viral outbreaks that would be a different kind of pandemic. So we've limited to any coronavirus iteration.
Well, remember, this is just ending the emergency. So if there's no emergency for COVID-20, 21, 22, there's no need to end it.
But should something come in the next little bit, we just wanted to have a belt and suspender.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sir?
First, I would like to thank Representative Scott for putting very eloquently with the point that I was wanting to make is that we cannot allow districts to limit our freedom. We, the people, need to stand up and get a hold of our legislatures and our governor and say, you cannot unlawfully dictate how and where I can go.
Thank you for your comments. You're absolutely right. And I also believe that there are ideas that are circulating to deal with the public health districts and the statute that is permissive. Yes, ma'am.
I have a super quick question for the senator and the representatives. How do you want us to communicate with you? Testimony, emails, phone calls? What is the best way?
What's your preferred way of communication from your constituents?
Every legislator will be different. I prefer a phone call. Some like emails, some like text. It's just every legislator. So you need to meet your legislators and see what they prefer. That's where you have influence over because you vote them in and out of office. And so that's where your influence is.
So contact your local representatives.
To that point, direct emails, the mass emails just kind of get buried into things. So if it's the same language from the same person, so even if it's the same language, change it a little bit, but send it to your legislator. And if they're not working with you, go to that committee and you'll find someone. But personal is always best.
We haven't heard from this lady back here.
Well, I just wanted to kind of address the FEMA thing, because that seems to be the big thing up with that sign, and then a question for Mr. Rice, because she's not here. But so the issue, what I'm hearing from all of this is that the big issue is not having that money would not take care of like some of the things you brought up, like Meals on Wheels, all these different programs for communities. And in reality, the community should be taking care of those things. That's what the churches used to be for. That's what communities would come together and, take care of those problems. And then to your comment, Senator Rice, you said like in the end, the Constitution or
Senator Reed.
I thought it was Rice. Okay,
that is a compliment.
you said the Constitution would override all of that, and that would in the end that would be the focus of the Constitution. But when these programs take over in such a way, it ends up being telling the people that we know better how to take care of you, we know better how to take care of your health, how to programs for you. We need to have money for these programs rather than putting the power in the people.
So please don't misunderstand. I'm not promoting a program. The Senate is asking the question that says.
But the money's going to.
We need to be careful not to have discussions like be too back and forth.
So what would the consequences be? And you'll hear that, I think, as Representative Young said. Let's have these conversations.
I would like to meet.
All right, yeah, and that's a perfect opportunity for you to visit with senators and also to testify in support of this gentleman over here.
First of all, thank you so much for doing this, showing us how to go through the website things. Is there a website by chance that we can go on and see some transparency where those funds are going, any federal funds, so that we can step in?
Absolutely, and perhaps that might be a subject for discussion at one of these things, that we can step the citizens through the transparency website that's been established under the Controller's Office. Thank you for
There
that.
it is right there.
One more question and we'll wrap it up. Yes,
May I just involved, this is no comment to you guys. If you guys really want to get involved, find out who your precinct committeeman is and start attending your precinct monthly meetings. And that will really help you out.
And just teach the people around us, right? Things
Yes,
like education.
absolutely, absolutely.
People in your sphere is not on what they're teaching us. Okay.
Okay, all right, we're gonna adjourn for the day. I just wanna thank you all for being here, and we'll continue to do this on a weekly basis. And, but so stay tuned on the location and subject. Thanks for being here, really appreciate, we need to hear from you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.